Marcus decided I would drown before the dinner rush even started. At Aurelia, drowning looked like polished smiles and silent punishment. He handed me a section I'd never worked, then forgot to tell me the new reservation chart had changed. When I asked, he sighed like my existence was the inconvenience. My apron string had snapped earlier. The replacement was missing. Little things, but they stacked. One bad review and my shifts vanished. I could already hear the landlord's voicemail in my head. How was I supposed to keep my life standing when they kept kicking the legs out again? I was 28, and my daughter was 6, which meant every mistake had a price tag. Mia needed after-school care until I finished late shifts, and the center charged $250 a week like it was nothing. Rent was $1,200, and my bank account hovered near zero the way tired eyes hover near sleep. I kept a photo of her taped inside my order pad. Missing tooth grin, purple backpack, the kind of hope that doesn't know math yet. Tonight I couldn't afford pride. I couldn't afford a fight. I just had to survive the room and make it home tonight. Aurelia, in Boston, was built for people who never carried their own groceries. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble, and the air smelled like truffle butter, citrus peel, and money that never sweated. The guests moved like they owned gravity silk dresses, cufflinks, voices trained to be heard. Servers like me wore black, white, and learned how to disappear. In the back, behind a velvet curtain, was the vault, our dining wing for discretion. Discretion lived there. So did trouble. Marcus glanced at my name tag, then at the curtain, and my stomach tightened. He had that smile that meant consequences tonight. He pointed at the vault as if I were a tool, not a person, and my feet moved before my brain caught up. A tray of champagne flutes dug into my palms. I could feel the tremble in my wrists from 4 doubles this week, from lifting Mia onto my hip after midnight because she'd fallen asleep waiting. The curtain swallowed sound when I stepped through. Jazz from the main room faded to a distant heartbeat. Inside, the lighting was lower, warmer, like the room hid secrets. Table 12 sat at the center, and everything about it felt wrong already. There were 3 men, but my eyes locked on the early 30s man who didn't move when I entered. He sat with his back to the wall, in a charcoal suit that looked deadly. Dark hair, sharp jaw, skin kissed by sun, and eyes so dark they swallowed the candlelight. He watched me like he was measuring distance, like the tray and my heartbeat were numbers. To his left was a bald giant with a bulge under his jacket. To his right, a lean man with silver at his temples scanned the curtain. The air felt thinner as I stepped closer. My voice came out steady because I'd trained it that way, and my hands started pouring before I trusted them. Gold bubbles climbed the glass, bright against the dim room. I leaned in, careful, praying nothing would spill, because one stain here could erase my paycheck. That's when my heel caught the edge of the rug. My body pitched forward, and the world tilted. I felt the bottle slide and heat rush to my face, felt eyes on me. In that suspended second, I reached for the champagne instead of myself. Then hands caught my waist and held me upright. I froze, breath trapped, because his grip was firm without being cruel, like he could decide what happened and still care if I bruised. I was too close, my hip nearly brushing his chair. His cologne hit first cedar over something darker, smoke and leather. The lean man saved the bottle, but my disaster had already happened. I kept apologizing in my head. I pictured Marcus cutting my shifts, Mia's lunch account going negative. I tried to step back, to disappear again, but the man's gaze pinned me in place. It wasn't flirtation. It was attention, sharp as a blade tonight. Behind the curtain, I sensed someone approaching, ready to yank me back into my place. At Aurelia, humiliation was a ritual, and servers were the offering. Anger bubbled under my shame because none of this was random. I'd been sent here like bait. I waited for the grip on my arm, the schedule threat, the firing disguised as policy. Instead, the man in the charcoal suit made a small motion with his hand, barely a lift of his fingers. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. The giant stopped. The lean man paused. Outside, footsteps halted as if awaiting permission. I stared at his hand like it controlled more than dinner. My pulse wasn't romantic. It was survival. Shame cooled into truth. This room ran on his permission. When he looked at me again, the attention felt heavy and steady. I expected dismissal. Instead, his gaze went to the empty chair beside him, and the silence turned into an instruction. I didn't hear a word, but my body understood. He was about to make me sit, breaking every rule I knew. And that was when I realized I wasn't invisible to Nico DeMarco whether I wanted that attention or not anymore. The vault held its breath after my heel snagged, and Nico DeMarco caught me. My cheeks burned, my pulse hammered, and my hands hovered near the tray like I could rewind time by sheer will. I waited for Marcus to storm through the curtain and announce my last shift. Instead, Nico made a tiny stop motion, barely more than 2 fingers lifting. The bald giant at his left froze mid-scan. The silver-haired man on his right paused mid-reach. Even the soft jazz from the main room felt muted, like the restaurant itself had decided to listen. I tried to retreat into my server mask, eyes down, shoulders tucked, apology already forming in my throat. Nico's gaze followed me anyway, calm and unblinking. He angled the empty chair beside him with quiet certainty, as if the next move belonged to him. Every rule I knew screamed at me. Servers do not sit with guests, especially not in the vault. My feet trembled inside my heels. My calves cramped. I could feel sweat cooling along my spine. I could also feel the edge of panic, sharp as a paper cut, whispering that one wrong decision would cost me a dinner tomorrow. I told myself to stand up, to step back, to disappear. That was how I survived here. But exhaustion makes you slow, and humiliation makes you oddly brave for a second. I'd worked 4 doubles this week, and my body felt like it was made of wet sand. I'd spent the afternoon comparing bills like they were enemies on a battlefield, deciding which one got paid and which one got a promise. I was tired of shrinking before anyone even pushed. Nico watched me like he saw the habit in my bones, the way I apologized before I was accused, the way my flinch came early. And somehow, against my better judgment, I sat. The chair swallowed me in expensive softness. My knees bumped the linen tablecloth, and I tucked my hands into my lap so no one could see them shake. Sitting that close, I noticed everything. The clean edge of Nico's suit cuff, the quiet precision of his breathing, the way the bald bodyguard kept his shoulder turned just enough to block angles. Danger felt normal to them, like salt on the table. I tried not to look at the silver-haired man, but when he shifted, my body reacted anyway, a small jerk I hated myself for. It was like my nervous system didn't believe I was allowed to be safe. Nico didn't touch me again. He didn't crowd me. He just held the space like he owned it and let me feel the weight of being seen. It made my throat dry. It made my ears ring. It also made something inside my chest ache, because no one at Aurelia ever looked at me this closely unless they were searching for a mistake. He seemed to be searching for truth. I could sense him clocking the worn seams of my uniform, the faint tremor in my wrists, the way my shoulders curved inward like I was trying to vanish. He made another small motion and the silver-haired man slipped through the curtain. No one asked questions. No one hesitated. That was when I started to understand that this wasn't only about money. It was about control. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs as I imagined Marcus seeing me here, sitting, breaking the rules, and taking it out of my paycheck for weeks. The food arrived quickly, set in front of me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not leftovers, not a staff snack, but a real plate with steam rising and a smell so rich it made my stomach ache with hunger. I stared at it, stunned by the audacity of being fed. I was used to skipping meals so Mia could have fruit cups and new shoes when the old ones pinched. I was used to swallowing hunger like it was part of the job. My first instinct was to refuse, because refusing kept me free. My second instinct was pure math. If I ate here, I wouldn't buy a $9 sandwich later, and that $9 could stay in my account for Mia's field trip envelope. My stomach decided before my pride did. It growled, loud enough that heat rushed up my neck. I waited for Nico to smirk, for the men to laugh, for the humiliation to sharpen. Nothing like that happened. Nico's expression barely changed, but the air loosened, like he'd expected the truth of me to show up. I took a bite. The flavor hit like warmth after a cold night, and my eyes stung with sudden, ridiculous emotion. I chewed slowly, ashamed of how badly my body wanted this. Somewhere across the city, Mia was probably asleep under her star blanket, and I was eating food that cost more than my groceries. My phone buzzed in my apron and I flinched. The screen flashed Mia in her purple raincoat, crayon smear and all. Just a pickup reminder. Yet my fingers shook. Nico saw her, and everything about his attention changed. He seemed to promise we would move carefully, start slow, and not break me. Marcus peeked in, ready to scold, then went pale when Nico lifted his eyes. Marcus backed away, polite. I knew the next power move was coming. Marcus didn't come storming in with the satisfaction I expected. He slid through the curtain like a man rehearsing anger, chin lifted, eyes already narrowed at me in the chair. For half a second, I saw the speech forming on his mouth, the rule book he was about to swing at my head. Then Nico lifted his gaze. That was all. Marcus's face drained so fast it looked painful, and his whole body recalibrated, like someone had changed the temperature in the room. The vault went quieter, not because sound disappeared, but because everyone chose silence. The bald bodyguard shifted just enough to block Marcus's path. The silver-haired man didn't move, and somehow that stillness carried more threat than a shout. Marcus swallowed, nodded too many times, and backed out with the careful politeness people use around live wires. I sat there with my palms sweating against my thighs, watching my manager retreat from a table he technically ran. A minute later he returned, but the man who came back wasn't the one who'd tried to punish me. His shoulders were lower. His eyes kept flicking toward Nico like he needed permission to breathe. He bent slightly toward me and, without saying it plainly, made it clear my shift wasn't ending in punishment. My name went onto the vault roster. My pay rate changed. My schedule became untouchable starting tonight. By the time he left again, the damage was done. I understood what had just happened in a way my brain didn't want to accept. Nico hadn't argued, hadn't negotiated, hadn't raised his voice. He'd simply existed, and the rules around me had rearranged themselves. My job, my section, my schedule, my ability to buy groceries tomorrow, all of it suddenly felt like it sat in the palm of a stranger's hand. Relief should have flooded me, but it came mixed with something colder. I thought of Mia's backpack by the door, her spelling list on the fridge, the sticky note I'd left for her sitter with the morning drop-off time. I couldn't afford to be reckless. I couldn't afford to owe anyone, especially not a man whose quiet control made adults flinch. I took another bite of the food in front of me and felt my throat tighten, because being cared for shouldn't feel like a trap, and yet it did. When Nico finally stood, the room moved with him. Chairs shifted. Jackets were adjusted. The curtain opened without anyone touching it, like the restaurant itself wanted him out safely. I tried to rise too fast, instinctively reaching for my tray, for my roll, for the safety of doing my job. A hand appeared at my elbow, steadying without gripping. Not force, direction. My feet followed before my pride could catch up. Outside, the night air hit me hard and sharp compared to the truffle-scented warmth inside. A black SUV waited at the curb, windows tinted so dark, nearly black. The driver stepped out first, scanning the street with calm. The door opened, and I hesitated on the sidewalk, keys biting into my palm. My mind screamed about Mia's morning, about breakfast, about being awake at 6, about not showing up exhausted to her school gate. And still, I slid into the back seat. Leather cradled me, expensive and unfamiliar. The door closed with a heavy sound that felt like a boundary snapping into place. The city lights blurred through the tinted glass, and suddenly my old life was on the other side of a sealed bubble. I gave my address because my mouth moved on autopilot, because my fear wanted the ride over, because the thought of walking home alone after midnight felt worse. Nico sat beside me, close enough that I could feel heat, not close enough to crowd. He watched me like he was memorizing the cracks in my armor. I sensed a promise in the way he waited, in the way he didn't rush, as if whatever this was would unfold carefully, on purpose. My mind translated it as starting slow, and it landed like shelter and warning. My building looked smaller than usual when we pulled up, like it had shrunk from shame, peeling paint, a busted intercom, a stairwell that always smelled of fried onions and damp laundry. I stepped out, and the cold slapped my cheeks awake. On the front door, a paper screamed final notice in bold letters, rent past due. I felt the familiar panic flare, sharp enough to make my vision blur. My phone buzzed before I could breathe through it. A message from Trent Hale, my ex, carried the same smug pressure he used to trap me in corners. He didn't write Nico's name, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear. He'd seen, or someone had told him, and he wanted me to know I wasn't out of reach. I stood on the sidewalk with my keys shaking and the SUV idling behind me, and one thought hammered through my skull. If my past already noticed my future, who else was watching at dawn? I barely slept after Aurelia. The chandelier light kept flashing behind my eyelids, and Trent's late-night message kept flashing behind my ribs. Nico's calm face sat between those two kinds of glare, like a door I'd already walked through. I kept checking my phone, not for romance, but for threats, rent, school, the past. At 2:30 a.m. I finally dozed off, clutching my keys like they were armor. Mia's alarm was set for 6, and my body knew it. Morning in my apartment always sounded the same. The cheap coffee maker wheezing, the radiator knocking, the neighbor's TV seeping through the wall. Mia's sneakers waited by the door, toes scuffed from recess, and her purple backpack sagged against the chair like a tired little animal. I moved on autopilot, hunting for a missing sock, packing grapes into a plastic container, signing the permission slip I'd forgotten last night. Every task was small, but together they were my whole life. At 6:45 in the morning, there was a knock that didn't match the building. It was too polite, too confident, like whoever stood outside didn't worry about broken intercoms or cracked steps. When I opened the door, a delivery driver held 2 paper bags and looked past me like he'd been told where to stand. I didn't need a logo to know it was the kind of place I only walked by. A small card was tucked under the handles, and I didn't read it so much as feel the intent. He wanted me to eat and stop arguing. My first reflex was rationing, even with food I hadn't paid for. I pictured Mia waking up and asking why the table looked like a holiday when she'd only asked for cereal. Guilt hit hard, stupid, and automatic, because my brain still believed I didn't deserve nice things unless my daughter got them first. Inside, the bags were warm croissants, yogurt with honey, strawberries so red they looked fake, and a coffee that smelled like someone cared. There was also a plain, kid-friendly box. Like Nico had guessed, Mia would want something simple. That detail made my throat tighten more than the luxury did. It was thoughtful in a way that felt dangerous, because thoughtfulness means someone is paying attention. Mia patted out, rubbing her eyes, hair wild, asking for pancakes like she always did on a school day. I kept my voice bright, like nothing in my world had shifted overnight. I poured her milk, cut a banana, and slid the kid box onto her placemat as if it belonged there. She just shrugged and started eating, because kids accept magic without asking who paid for it. While she chewed, I packed her lunchbox, tucked in a note with a goofy doodle, and checked the school calendar taped to the fridge. My eyes kept sliding back to the croissants, like they were written in a language I didn't speak. When Mia turned to hunt her other sock, I took one small bite and nearly cried at the softness. It tasted like rest, like someone had decided I didn't have to run on fumes. That comfort landed, and then suspicion followed right behind it, because I'd learned care could be a leash. My phone buzzed again, and my stomach tightened before I even looked. A new message, from an unknown number, made it clear a car was already outside, and a driver had a name and instructions. It also made it clear my day had been planned without my consent. Errands handled, shopping for dinner, no arguments. I stared at the screen, torn between the relief of help and the terror of debt. I thought about my checking account, the final notice on the door downstairs, and Trent's smirk hiding behind his words. If Nico could send breakfast like a command, what else could he send into my life? I braided Mia's hair, zipped her jacket, and walked her down the stairs with my hand locked around hers. Outside, a black sedan idled half a block away, respectful distance, like it was pretending not to be there. I felt watched, and I hated how part of me also felt safer. At the school gate, I forced a smile, kissed Mia's forehead, and reminded her I'd see her after pickup. She ran inside without looking back, and my heart followed her anyway. I was halfway home when the school number lit up my screen. The administrator's tone, even through my memory of it, carried that careful professionalism people use when something almost went wrong. Trent had shown up early, claiming he had permission, trying to pull Mia out before I arrived. They hadn't released her, because my paperwork was clear, but the fact he tried made my hands go numb. I stopped on the sidewalk, breath burning, seeing Trent's old control reaching for my child like it still belonged to him. In the same instant, I understood what the real stakes were. This wasn't about a raise or a ride or croissants on my counter. It was about Mia. And the moment Nico's orbit brushed my life, my past woke up hungry. I turned toward that waiting black sedan, stomach twisting, and wondered how fast I could learn the rules before someone broke them for me. Because if Trent could test a gate today, what would he dare tomorrow in velvet? The call from Mia's school left my hands numb and my throat tight. Trent hadn't taken her, but he'd tried to step across the line like it was still his to move. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the brick building, imagining Mia's little face behind the glass, safe but confused. Anger came first, hot and clean, because he hadn't targeted me, he'd tested my child. I forced myself to breathe, to think like a mother, not like a woman who just got dazzled by a powerful stranger. I promised myself no man would ever touch her peace again. Inside, I moved fast. I called the office back, confirmed Mia was still in class, and told them my pickup list had one name only, mine. I emailed the updated authorization form, then drove straight to the school to add a password for early releases. My hands shook as I wrote, but my voice stayed steady. Mia deserved steady. On the way out, I texted my sitter the new rule. No handoffs unless I say so. Only then did I let myself feel it. The thin line between ordinary life and a stranger's obsession, and my heart leaning toward danger. The black sedan was waiting exactly where it had been earlier, engine idling like patience. The driver stepped out when he saw me and introduced himself as Ray Coleman with a calm that felt practiced. He didn't push, didn't touch, just held the door and looked away to give me space. I should have refused. I should have gone to work, or cleaned my apartment, or lived inside the lines. But Nico had already invaded my day with croissants and certainty, and part of me wanted to know how far his care went. I slid into the back seat, breathless. Ray drove us into a part of the city I usually avoided because it made me feel like I was trespassing. Storefronts glowed behind spotless glass, and every sidewalk looked freshly washed. My reflection flashed in boutique windows, and I barely recognized the woman in thrifted jeans and yesterday's tired hair. I kept thinking about Mia's lunchbox, about the $20 I'd been proud to save last week, and how easily Nico could erase those numbers. That power should have terrified me more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange pull, like safety with teeth, and I hated liking it. The boutique was hushed, carpet thick enough to swallow my footsteps. Soft lighting warmed the walls, and the air smelled faintly of clean fabric and expensive perfume. A woman with perfect eyeliner greeted me by name, like I belonged there, and I could feel my shoulders tense in defense. I kept expecting the judgment I'd known in nicer places, the quick scan that decided I was wrong. Instead, hands offered water, a chair, and a rack of options sized for me. I tried a simple black dress first, then a deep blue one that made my skin look alive again. In the fitting room, the mirror felt too honest. It showed the curve of my shoulders when I stopped shrinking, the lines by my eyes, and the way I held my stomach like I was protecting something even when Mia wasn't near. When the dress zipped, I inhaled and saw a version of myself I'd forgotten. A woman, not just a schedule. The fabric skimmed instead of clung, and I could imagine walking into a room without apologizing. Then my brain snapped back to reality. A dress didn't solve rent. A dress didn't stop Trent. It reminded me I existed. At the register, I caught the total on the screen and my stomach dropped. The dress was $3,000. The shoes were $800. The numbers didn't fit my life, not with $1,200 rent and a lunch account that sometimes ran low. Panic hit hard. I wanted to sprint back to my old jeans, back to invisibility, before debt could hook me. I thought of Mia and the way she watches my face for safety. I thought of Trent twisting anything shiny into a weapon. My hands shook, and I hated the truth. The dress felt like oxygen, and I was starving. I let them bag the dress, but I promised myself a boundary. Mia would never learn that love means being owned. Comfort could be a gift, not a cage. I changed once more in the fitting room, snapped a quick mirror photo, and sent it before fear could stop me. Nico replied almost immediately. I didn't read words. I felt them. Stunned approval, pride, a warmth that traveled straight to my ribs. It wasn't seduction. It was validation. My eyes stung because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be looked at as if I mattered. By anyone in years. Back home, I laid the dress across my bed like a warning. The fabric made my comforter look smaller, and the contrast stung. Mia's backpack leaned by the door, reminding me who I lived for. My phone buzzed with the plan for tonight, and one word kept echoing. Private. Private could mean romance. It could also mean hiding. After Trent tested the gate, hiding felt urgent, not sweet. I checked the locks, set out Mia's pajamas, and listened to the building settle. I wanted to believe Nico could keep us safe. I feared he was hiding me from a storm. By late afternoon, my apartment felt like it was holding its breath. I hung the blue dress on the closet door and stared at it while Mia colored at the kitchen table. Her sitter, Mrs. Callahan, arriving with a tote of puzzles. I packed Mia's school bag for tomorrow, laid out pajamas, and taped the new pickup password to the fridge. Mother first, always. Still, my hands shook as I curled my hair, because tonight wasn't just a date. It was a doorway for me. Ray's sedan pulled up at 7, headlights cutting across my cracked sidewalk. I hugged Mia longer than she liked and smelled strawberry shampoo in her hair, reminding myself that no man, not even Nico, outranked her safety. Mrs. Callahan promised routines would stay normal, and I believed her. In the back seat, leather and clean cologne replaced my kitchen's onion smell. The door shut with a heavy click, and the city lights turned into blurred watercolor behind tinted glass. Keys stayed clenched in my palm. Ray drove us through Boston's brighter neighborhoods, past storefronts that looked like jewelry boxes. My stomach flipped each time we passed a corner where Trent used to wait for me, as if memory could step into traffic. Nico's building rose from the street like dark glass. A guard nodded at Ray, then at me, and the lobby swallowed sound. In the elevator, numbers climbed without effort, and my ears popped softly. When the doors opened, the penthouse smelled like candle wax and quiet and fresh basil. There was no crowd, no maitre d', no clinking room to hide inside. Just a table set for two, near floor-to-ceiling windows, city glitter spread below like spilled coins. Soft music hummed from somewhere unseen, and the kitchen held the warm smell of roasted chicken and lemon. Nico moved with that careful control I'd already learned to fear, but tonight it was aimed at comfort. He checked my face, my posture, my breathing, as if he wanted my yes to arrive first before anything else. During the first course, my nerves finally loosened enough for truth. I told him, mostly in my head and partly out loud, how loneliness isn't the same as being alone. How I could carry groceries, bills, and a sleepy child up 4 flights, yet still feel invisible. Motherhood made me fierce, but it also erased the parts of me that used to dream about school, travel, or even a quiet morning. Nico didn't rush to fix it. He just listened, steady as a wall there. He refilled my water before it emptied and pulled my chair a fraction closer only after my shoulders stopped tensing. When my fingers worried the hem of the dress, he stilled his hands and waited until I relaxed, like he was teaching my body it could choose. He said my name once, soft, and it felt heavier than it had ever sounded in my mouth. Not waitress, not mom on the run, Lena, as a whole person. I hated how much I wanted to keep that feeling alive. After dessert, he stood and offered his hand, leaving space for me to decide. I could have stepped back, laughed it off, and asked Ray to take me home. Instead, I followed him to the window, where the city looked distant and harmless. Nico moved slowly, pausing each time my breath hitched, and I realized I was nodding in tiny ways I'd never trusted myself to give. His mouth met mine with careful warmth, and my whole history went quiet for a moment at last. When we pulled apart, I didn't feel claimed. I felt named. Like Lena wasn't a label on a schedule anymore, but a person someone planned a room around. It should have scared me more than it did. I thought about Mia's sleeping face and promised myself this tenderness would never outrank her. Nico kept his forehead near mine, breathing steady, as if he was holding back on purpose. Then his phone buzzed on the table. Once. Again. Sharp enough to cut through the music. Nico glanced at the screen and something shuddered behind his eyes. His shoulders squared, the softness draining away like water down a sink. He didn't apologize with words. He did it with a touch to my wrist, enough to steady me, as if telling me to stay put. He stepped aside and answered, voice low and clipped, colder than the glass. I couldn't hear details, but I heard authority, the kind that expects obedience. My skin prickled, realizing gentleness was only one of his masks. He ended the call without looking relieved. The air felt different, as if the penthouse had remembered it sat above a city of teeth. Nico crossed back to me, but the danger stayed in his posture, coiled and ready. I thought of Trent at the school gate and understood why Nico wanted privacy. Not to impress me, but to shield me. My pulse kicked up, half dread, half hope. If he could switch like this on command, what was he hiding behind the next door? His phone stopped buzzing, but the air didn't go back to warm. Nico came close again, yet something in him stayed locked, like a blade slid back into a sheath. I felt it in my skin. My mind jumped to Mia, to the school office, to Trent's smug attempt to step past my rules. I could still taste the croissant, and it felt less like comfort and more like bait. I didn't want romance in the dark. I wanted truth in the light. I'd spent too many years reading men who smiled while they tightened the leash. I had survived Trent by learning how to nod and back away without triggering him, how to keep my voice soft so my life stayed predictable. But predictable had never protected Mia. It only kept me tired. So I planted my feet on Nico's hardwood floor and let the anger show. I made it clear, in the plainest way I knew, that I would not follow anyone blind, not with my daughter in the picture. Nico didn't argue. He watched me the way he had in the vault, like he was measuring whether I meant it. Then he made a decision that felt heavy. He crossed the room, pressed his palm to a hidden panel, and a section of wall slid open with a mechanical sigh. Cold light spilled out. He glanced back once, not pulling me, not commanding me, just waiting. My heart thudded as I followed. If this was the price of being near him, I needed to see the receipt. The room looked nothing like a lover's secret. It was a control center, clean and brutal in its purpose. One wall held screens, showing live feeds of doorways, streets, rooftops, places that could have been anywhere in Boston. A map of the city covered the next wall, marked with colored pins and neat lines that made neighborhoods look like chess squares. A steel desk sat in the middle with encrypted phones, a laptop dock, and folders stacked like evidence. Even the air felt different, colder, filtered, as if safety lived behind locks and passwords. I saw photos too, clipped to a board in tidy rows. Faces captured from distance, license plates, grainy snapshots of men entering buildings. Next to them were coded notes I couldn't read. Initials, dates, and arrows that suggested movement and money. Nico didn't give me a speech. He didn't need to. Standing there, I understood the shape of his life. He wasn't just a rich man who liked privacy. He managed territory, enforced rules, and kept systems running that normal people pretended didn't exist. My stomach tightened the way it had when the school called. This world had edges, and Mia's small hands would bleed on them if I was careless. At the same time, I remembered Nico catching me before I hit the floor, feeding me when I was running on coffee, looking at Mia's photo like she mattered too. That contradiction made me dizzy. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. Mostly I wanted control. Not his control over me, but my control over what touched my daughter's life. So I laid out my lines, not as threats, but as facts. Mia stayed off his chessboard. No gifts aimed at buying access to her. No decisions about our routines made without my agreement. No hiding information under the excuse of protection, because secrets were how Trent had kept me small. If danger was coming, I needed to know what it looked like and how to respond. And if Nico ever used his money or his people to box me in, I would walk, even if it hurt, even if it ruined me. Nico listened without flinching. The coldness in him didn't disappear, but it shifted, like a soldier recognizing another soldier. He opened a drawer, pulled out a slim device, and tapped in something that looked like a new protocol. He handed it to me so I could set a contact name and an emergency button. My choice, not his. Then he offered his hand, steady, not possessive. The agreement didn't feel like romance. It felt like a contract written in posture and restraint. A man appeared in the doorway as if he'd been there the whole time, tall and broad in a plain suit that still read as armor. I learned his name through the way he and Nico moved around each other. Gavin Rourke, Gabe. His eyes held no judgment, only assessment, and the assessment landed on Mia immediately. With a few clipped gestures, he let Nico know someone had been feeding information out, selling schedules and addresses. When he referenced schools as pressure points, my throat tightened, and Trent's shadow snapped into focus. I backed out of the room with my lungs tight, the penthouse feeling less like a date and more like a bunker. Nico walked me to the doorway and let me choose whether to step back into candlelight or stay with the screens. I chose the candlelight for now, because Mia needed me human in the morning, but I carried the map in my head, every pin in line. I was staying in Nico's orbit on my terms, and that meant my old life could not stay careless. If Trent was the leak, then my past wasn't behind me. It was a key in someone else's hand. 3 months passed after Nico showed me that cold room of screens and maps, and after I drew my lines around Mia. Life did not turn into a fairy tale. It turned into something steadier. I still worked at Aurelia, but fewer nights, safer sections, and no more doubles that left me shaking on the subway home. I started an online certificate in bookkeeping, studying after Mia fell asleep. The relief was simple. I could breathe without counting every dollar for the first time again. Mia noticed the changes before I did. Mornings stopped feeling like emergencies. I packed lunches without the tight panic of an empty fridge, and I walked her to school with coffee that tasted like coffee, not desperation. A dark sedan sometimes sat a block away, far enough to pretend it was coincidence. Gabe would appear in the background at drop-off, never staring, just existing like a quiet fence. I hated needing it, but I loved that Mia stayed smiling even on the hard days. Nico earned trust the slow way, the only way that counts. He showed up when he said he would, and he left when I asked him to. He learned Mia's peanut allergy and kept safe snacks in his kitchen without making a big speech about it. When the sink in my apartment clogged, he sent a plumber, not a lecture. He asked what bedtime story she liked and remembered it. Consistency became his love language, and it softened me in ways I did not expect. Lena DeMarco stepped into my life like a sister I never had. She was sharp, funny, and impossible to intimidate, and she treated me like a person, not Nico's property. She brought Mia a set of markers and sat on my floor to draw with her, then asked me what I wanted for myself. She told me I could say no to Nico and still be respected, and she proved it by challenging him right in front of me until I laughed at my fear. At Aurelia, the old staff stopped testing me. My manager's tone changed, careful around the edges, and my schedule came printed with my name in bold, as if it mattered. I used the extra time to study and to cook real dinners, not microwaved noodles. Mia and I danced in the living room while the kettle whistled. I kept waiting for the catch, but weeks passed, and nothing snapped. It almost felt normal, which was the strangest part because normal had never belonged to us. Still, the shadows never fully left. Some nights Nico came over and his mind stayed somewhere else, eyes fixed on a point past my shoulder. Gabe would text new rules through Sophia, different routes, earlier pickups, a second car sometimes trailing farther back. The first time I noticed a new lock on Nico's private door, my chest tightened. He held me close after Mia went to bed, but his body was braced, like he expected impact, and I wondered who was pushing his world inward. Meetings multiplied. Nico started leaving earlier, returning later, and the silence between those times felt loud. Sophia stopped joking about certain neighborhoods and began carrying her phone like a weapon made of glass. I caught snippets of names I did not recognize and sensed territory being measured, tested. Once, I saw a new face outside my building, pretending to smoke, watching the entrance too long. Gabe handled it without drama, but the message landed. Someone was counting our steps again, and Mia was on that list. When Nico finally told me a negotiation was coming, I heard the strain underneath his calm. He needed to meet a rival group and lock down terms before things turned loud. For the first time, he asked me to move instead of just watching from a distance. Sophia offered a property outside the city, quiet and guarded, where Mia could still sleep. I hated the idea of running, but I hated the idea of risking my daughter more. I chose the safe plan that night. I packed like a mother in a storm, fast and precise. Mia's pajamas, her inhaler, her favorite book with the bent corner, extra socks, the school folder, the stuffed rabbit she called Brave. Sophia's driver met us at dusk, and the car kept to back roads. At the property, lights were low and the air smelled of pine. Guards stayed outside, invisible but present. Mia thought it was an adventure. I smiled for her and swallowed fear because I knew real adults were being hunted. Near midnight, my phone lit up, and Nico's name made my stomach drop. The first update sounded almost steady in my head. The meeting had gone as planned, terms accepted, no shots fired, no chaos. Relief barely touched me before the second message hit harder. Someone had leaked the location to federal agents, and there was a tight window before a raid. My hands went cold around the phone. If the light could shatter this fast, what would happen to Mia next when dawn arrived? The safe house didn't look like a fortress from the road, but the moment the gate slid shut behind us, it felt like one. Gravel crunched under tires, lights stayed low, and every adult moved like they had a stopwatch in their bones. Phones kept vibrating on kitchen counters. Sophia's people checked cameras, checked locks, checked the same things twice. I stood in the hallway with Mia's little hand in mine, pretending my heartbeat was normal. Somewhere in the city, federal pressure was tightening, and I could feel it even out here, like thunder you don't see yet. Gabe appeared without drama, just a quiet nod that told me he'd been watching the whole time. He didn't hand me a rule book. He made the rules happen. He guided me to keep Mia within arm's reach, not because she was fragile, but because speed mattered. He had Sophia's staff switch our phones to silent and keep them face down, unless a check-in was due. He pointed out the back door, the safe room, the car keys already staged. No spontaneous errands, no stepping outside for air, no guessing. If my gut whispered wrong, I treated it like a fire alarm. Mia didn't understand any of it, which somehow made it worse. She thought the villa was a sleepover, the kind with extra pillows and a big yard she wasn't allowed to play in. She asked for her rabbit, then asked for water, then asked why the grown-ups kept walking fast. I gave her the answers that fit a 6-year-old world and swallowed the rest. I brushed her hair with my fingers and kept my voice soft, but my mind kept sprinting. What happens when a child learns that love comes with gates and codes? Sophia stayed close, steady in a way that didn't shame me for shaking. She made food appear, simple things Mia would actually eat, and she kept it allergy safe without making a show of it. When I finally let my fear spill out, she didn't hush me. She let me name the truth. In Nico's world, the people you love become leverage. That was the part I could not forgive. I could handle my own risk. I could not stomach Mia being used to reach me, or used to reach him through me. Updates came in fragments, carried by the way Gabe's posture tightened, by the way Sophia's team shifted rooms when a phone buzzed. I didn't need details to know the stakes. The meeting location had been burned, and now people were racing to erase connections before uniforms showed up. Nico's name moved through the house like electricity, not spoken loudly, but felt. At some point, my phone lit up with a short instruction relayed through Sophia, and my stomach dropped. The light we'd built was real, but it could be crushed in a single hour. Nico didn't storm in. When he arrived, it was like the air corrected itself around him. He looked tired in a way money can't fix. Sleeves rolled, jaw set, eyes scanning corners before they found mine. He checked Mia first, not with a speech, but with a soft touch to her shoulder and a look that said she mattered. Then he and Gabe spoke in that fast, efficient rhythm of people who survive by planning. I caught the meaning in pieces. They had a narrow window. They needed to move clean, and no one was allowed to improvise. My anger finally found a place to stand. I didn't want romance in a safe house. I wanted a future where Mia didn't have to learn which exits were real. I told Nico, as clearly as I could without turning it into a fight, that this could not be our normal. If he wanted us in his life, he had to start cutting away the parts that pulled federal attention like a magnet. I wasn't asking him to become harmless. I was asking him to become smart enough to keep his love from becoming a target. He listened, and the stillness of his attention felt like agreement. Then my phone rang through the silence anyway. A school alert that should not have existed tonight. For a second I couldn't make sense of it, only the phrase that hit like a blackout. Mia was not at the pickup point. My knees went soft. I stared down the hall, suddenly unsure where Sophia had taken her for bedtime. Every terrible possibility tried to right itself in my head. Sophia was already moving, calm and fast, and Gabe was on another line before I could breathe. It turned out the alert was a systems lag, a planned early pickup logged under Sophia's family contact. Nona had collected Mia hours ago and brought her straight here, exactly as the protocol said. I found Mia in a bedroom, sprawled across a quilt, her rabbit tucked under her chin. She opened one eye and asked if I was mad. I wasn't mad at her. I was furious at a life where a glitch could make my soul leave my body. While I held her hand, Gabe's footsteps paused at the door, and Sophia signaled that we were moving again, tonight, to an off-the-books cottage. The safe house rules weren't theory anymore. They were the rails we'd ride through the dark. Was this love becoming a foundation, or a cage? By the time Sophia's gate slid open again, it wasn't a goodbye so much as a handoff. Gabe moved us like chess pieces, Mia bundled in her pink hoodie, my overnight bag in one hand, the other hand locked around hers. 2 SUVs idled with their lights dimmed, engines purring low. No one ran, but everyone moved fast. We left the safe house without fanfare, turning onto back roads that didn't feel like they belonged on any map. The city glow shrinking behind us until it looked like someone else's life. The cottage sat at the end of a dirt lane lined with bare trees, tucked into the woods like it had learned to disappear. Inside, the silence hit me harder than the siren energy I'd been bracing for. It smelled faintly of wood smoke and clean linen. A refrigerator hummed. Floorboards sighed under my shoes. Gabe checked windows and locks while I tried to convince my nervous system that quiet could mean safe. Mia's eyes were heavy, but she still fought sleep when she sensed my tension. I made the cottage feel like ours in small ways. Her familiar blanket on the bed, the tiny nightlight from my bag, her rabbit tucked under her arm. I washed her face at the sink, the water running too loud, and smoothed her hair with my fingers. I told a story from memory, brave girls, kind bears, until her breathing slowed and her hand went limp in mine. When she was out, I watched her sleep like I could guard her with my stare. The quiet didn't soothe me. It exposed me. Every creak sounded like a question. Every gust against the siding made me hold my breath. I paced the living room, counting steps the way I used to count dollars. I hated that my child was anywhere near this. I hated that love could turn into roots and backups. And I hated myself for missing Nico while I was terrified of what his world could do to us. A little after midnight, the digital clock on the microwave blinked 0:15, and my phone buzzed against the table like it had been holding its breath with me. I didn't read words so much as absorb meaning. The federal teams had come up empty. The building had been cleared, and the immediate heat was fading. Nico was safe, moving, and planning to get to us at dawn if the roads stayed clean. Relief hit so hard my knees went weak, and I had to grip the counter to stay upright. Then the second wave came less sweet, more honest. If a single leak could shove us into hiding, what kind of childhood was I building for Mia? I sat in the dark with a throw blanket around my shoulders and listened to Mia's small breaths from the bedroom. Outside, trees whispered, and I realized my body still didn't know how to rest. I pictured her at 10, at 15, still watching adults watch doors. I pictured her learning to read my face for danger, the way I'd learned to read managers for mood. That thought made something firm in me. I could love Nico and still refuse this life. I could accept protection and still demand change. My promise wasn't to romance. It was to my daughter's nervous system. The sky was only starting to gray when headlights washed across the trees and a car rolled up slow, tires crunching soft on the lane. Gabe stepped out first, scanning, then nodded once. Nico followed, and my chest loosened like someone had finally untied a knot. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sits behind the eyes. But he was here. He crossed the porch and pulled me into him with a careful strength, like he knew I was holding myself together by habit alone. I breathed him in cold air, clean soap, a trace of smoke, and felt my body remember what safety could feel like when it wasn't rented by fear. We didn't need speeches. I laid it out. I couldn't keep packing bags and calling it love. Not if Mia grew up reading doors instead of books. I repeated the line I'd drawn from the start: no one uses my daughter, not enemies and not devotion. Nico didn't argue. He went still, taking it in like a rule he could live by or lose us to. Then he chose. He committed to stepping back from the operations that pulled federal attention and shifting hard into legitimate businesses and cleaner structures, not as a gift, but as the new shape of our life. After Nico stepped away to coordinate, Gabe brought the last piece, calm as ever. The leak wasn't random. Patterns were forming, calls routed through familiar numbers. Information traded through places that brushed my old life. The name hovering at the edge was the one I'd been trying not to say: Trent Hale. My stomach turned, not because I was shocked, but because it meant the past still had a hand on the door, and now survival wasn't enough. I had to cut that hand off our future. 2 days after the cottage, Gabe set the confirmation on the kitchen table like it weighed 100 pounds. Not gore, not bravado, just paperwork and patterns. A prepaid phone account linked to Trent Hale. A school visitor log with his name misspelled the same way he used to sign birthday cards. A grainy parking lot clip from the afternoon he tried to pick Mia up early, smiling like rules were optional. It was enough to stop guessing. My past had been knocking on my new life, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. I didn't wait for Nico to handle it with quiet power. I handled it the clean way, the way a mother can sleep at night. I called the school and locked down Mia's pickup list until it was basically a vault of its own. I emailed the principal and the office manager so there was a written trail. I printed screenshots of Trent's messages and saved them to a folder labeled Mia, because that's what mattered, not my pride. I met with a family law attorney recommended by Sophia, filed for an emergency restraining order, and updated custody boundaries so there was no gray area left for Trent to exploit. Gabe helped me document everything like a checklist: dates, times, witnesses, the school call, the attempted pickup, the pattern of intimidation. No shouting match, no late-night confrontation, just consequences, served on paper, enforced by people whose job was keeping kids safe. When the judge approved it, I felt relief first, then grief. Relief that Mia wouldn't be a bargaining chip. Grief that I had needed court orders to protect her from a man who once promised to love our little family. I sat on the cottage porch with my coffee cooling in my hands and let myself mourn the version of adulthood I thought I'd have. Then I stood up, went inside, and made Mia pancakes shaped like lopsided hearts. Because kids don't need perfect, they need steady. Months later, steadiness stopped feeling like a miracle and started feeling like a habit. My shifts at Aurelia dropped to 3 nights a week, earlier hours, safer sections. I took an online certification in bookkeeping, the kind of skill you can build a future on. Mia stopped waking up at night to ask if the doors were locked. She started leaving drawings on the fridge again, bright suns and stick-figure families with too many smiles. Sophia became the kind of aunt figure who shows up with extra hair ties and the right snacks for the school field trip. Gabe's team stayed in the background, not hovering, just present in the way streetlights are present. You notice them most when they're gone. Nico changed in ways I could measure. Fewer closed-door meetings, more daylight hours, a calendar that included parent-teacher night and my finals week, not just territory updates. He built a compliance department for his companies, hired people who spoke fluent law and boring paperwork, and sold off anything that attracted raids and headlines. He didn't ask me to forget what he was. He asked me to watch what he did next. That was the difference. Love didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like construction. The day he showed me the building, I thought it was another real estate deal, another shiny asset to prove he could. But I recognized it before we even parked. My old walk-up, the place with the broken intercom, the hallway that smelled like bleach and defeat, the stairs I climbed with grocery bags and a sleeping toddler on my hip. He had bought it, not to erase my past, but to answer it. Renovations were already underway. Brighter lighting, working locks, cameras pointed at entrances instead of tenants, a clean courtyard where kids could play without broken glass. On the first floor, he planned an on-site childcare room partnered with a local nonprofit and a job training office with laptops and resume help, not charity with strings. Infrastructure, a foundation that didn't require anyone to beg. Standing there, I felt my throat tighten the way it used to when rent was due. Only this time, the tightness was pride. I had survived that building. I had raised a child inside thin walls and loud neighbors and constant math. And now my story wasn't being used to scare people. It was being used to build something safer for the next mom who thought she was invisible. Nico's power wasn't softer. It was redirected. Not fear, but foundation. Not control, but responsibility. I still have anxious moments. I still double-check school emails and keep backup numbers in my phone. Safety isn't a switch you flip. It's a practice. But Mia laughs louder now. She runs ahead of me on sidewalks without scanning faces. I went from a woman who apologized for existing to a woman who writes her boundaries in ink. And Nico, the man everyone once feared, learned that the only empire worth keeping is the one where the people you love can breathe. If any part of my story hit you, tell me which moment you would have chosen differently, and whether you think my lines were fair. Please like, share, and comment, so I know I'm not the only one learning that love should never require a woman to disappear to stay safe, and that healing can be built.